the Watergate building in Washington, this is Hotline TV. Now here are Hotline editors Amy Walter and John Mercurio.
Welcome to Hotline TV. I'm Amy Walter.
All right, and I'm Nora McAlvanah. This week, the Hotline braved high-speed ferries,
Did we ever?
Dick Morris run-ins, and horse manure. Lot of horse manure.
Yes.
To bring you the Mackinac straw poll.
Yes. Well, we did brave a lot, and there was a lot of running involved too. But you know who really was the runner? Romney was the big winner of the weekend, pulling in 39% of the vote to win Hotline's first straw poll in Mackinac Island. Not much to say there, so let's talk about the losers of the weekend.
Well, the losers.
What do you think? Is there a person that you start with, number one?
Well, you had the big Fred Thompson.
Yeah, I thought
loser.
that he was a guy that came in like a rock star. He was mobbed, as you saw, the grand porch. Everybody wanted to get a picture, including people who had been holding some other signs.
We saw them.
I think we
know who you are.
You know who you are. Supporters who went to get the pictures with Fred Thompson, and yet he had this great opportunity to give to really bring these people on board. They wanted to like him. They were excited to see him. The speech fell totally flat. I think his issue really comes down to this: he needs to find a way to tell his story. Instead of these sort of rambling resume about here's who I am and here's where I came from that never seems to go anywhere, he can get over the lack of policy prescriptions by talking about a story about him that defines his character. That's what they want to know, right? They wanted to figure out who this guy was because they want to be able to vote for him.
It's interesting that happened too, because he was the only one who in his speech really had, it was biography based. You know, he said this is where, it was very, more so than the other candidates, based on his biography, and yet still there's not that compelling story.
Which he, and they were willing to find it there. Now, maybe part of the problem is because he has such a compelling persona as a DA, right? Like nothing will be as exciting as the fact that he, let's hear, was in charge of a nuclear warship and is a very famous DA in New York City. That your real story doesn't seem as exciting, but you know, the fact that Romney came in first place, certainly impressive. He had the organization there, which suggests that he'll have the organization on the primary day too, but there's not the passion there for him. So I thought that was a very interesting point. So Nora, tell us a little bit about what you thought about Mike Huckabee and his no-show.
You know, you said it was a missed opportunity for Thompson. I think it was really a missed opportunity for Huckabee, who didn't show up, called Saul on, Saul was definitely the hit of the conference. But he called him on Friday and said, I can't show, apparently because of money, along with Brownback. They were scheduled to attend and didn't. And when we walked out of the ferry, if you remember, there were a slew of Huckabee supporters, people giving out stickers. We noted, wow, you know, it's going to be interesting to see the Huckabee support. And of course, when we arrived there, we found that out. And I think there was some opportunity to pick up a lot of votes. People were really looking to those speeches. Yeah,
they were looking to those speeches to get an answer. There were very few people. We sat down to dinner with a lot of these folks, and lunch with a lot of these folks. Most of them were there because they wanted to get a measure of these people. And since nobody else gave particularly memorable speeches, although McCain on the last night was said to have given the best speech, at least by Saul. For those of you who don't know him personally, he's the Michigan Republican chairman.
Your loss.
Yeah, he was the rock star of the weekend as well. But you know, he said that was McCain's best speech he's ever given. He's ever seen him give. So we know that Huckabee does great on the stump. We know that he's able to connect with people. You're right. I think that could have been an opportunity. And he also seems to do quite well in straw polls, does he not?
He does. I think he was the biggest loser of the last poll. I think
Indeed he was.
Any other thoughts on the weekend? Are there any?
I think that in general you have, what I found also interesting is the fact that you have this wide open primary in a state where Mitt Romney should, I mean, he's the homeboy.
Yeah.
Right? He started off his speech, he should have this thing wrapped up in the same way that Fred Thompson can wrap up a Tennessee and is doing so well in South Carolina. And yet there's not that love for the guy who, as he pointed out, spent his summers on Mackinac when his dad was governor. And even that failed to connect. So there's an opening in Michigan. McCain's, I think the one thing to note is that McCain's second place showing is probably inflated, right? That I think what his soon-to-be non-existent campaign in Michigan, I mean, I don't know how many people are left, but what was left of his Michigan operation made sure that they weren't going to be embarrassed in the straw poll.
They did,
by
to
turning
their
people out
credit,
to their
they
credit,
did.
and I think that was very important. But the reality is, if he's not there, with Romney, you know, not gaining in terms of like the passion and the love, there's room for somebody, whether it's Giuliani, whether it's, you know, can Thompson pull in there? I just don't know. I didn't see it. The other fascinating thing, I think, actually I'll say two things. One, social issues never mentioned. In fact, there's only one mention of the word unborn, and I think it was by Fred Thompson. So really stayed away from that. The only person not mentioned either, or actually mentioned the least, President Bush. Nobody talked about President Bush. In fact, Nicholas Sarkozy got more references than George Bush
Another
did.
star of the weekend.
He was.
Along with Margaret Thatcher.
Margaret Thatcher, Sarkozy, and Newt Gingrich.
Which tells you the state. I think that is a perfect metaphor for the state of, you know, the Republican Party in Michigan. People were really down on Michigan.
Right.
And it wasn't, there were no pick-me-ups, which I think, the reason I think Huckabee could have sort of moved into that morale area, because
they were looking for some reason to be happy.
We saw these speeches. They were really dry.
Yep.
They were about, you know, flat tax and tort reform and
yeah, these guys want to be inspired, and they're not finding one.
This is unborn, you know, or, you know, but they were looking for some inspiration, and I don't know that they got it.
But what we got was a lot of good fudge. So,
and overnight in Detroit.
Yes. At the airport. Anyway, looks like we're out of time for today, but please join us next time for another fascinating episode of Hotline TV. Yay. Everybody. Woo! Michigan. There we go.